don't want to, but the fact is they're lying about it. The White House itself, while it's publicly sounding this default alarm, has been privately reassuring banks that it won't default on the debt, even if the debt ceiling isn't raised. Well, that's because they can't default on the debt. That's another one of the lies, which we'll talk about in a minute. But talk about two-faced hypocrisy. The White House is publicly saying all the planes are going to fall out of the sky because we're going to have to lay off the air traffic controllers. School teachers are going to get fired. We're going to default on the national debt and become a pariah in the whole world. Your mortgage rates are going to go. All these lies, and privately they're talking to the banks and said, don't worry about it. This is just our public posture. We're not going to default on the debt because they don't want the banks to freak out and start doing something crazy. So just what is the debt ceiling and why all the lies? Well, I just told you one of the reasons for the lies. But what exactly is the debt ceiling? It's simply the limit that the government can borrow. It has nothing to do with spending. It has to do with borrowing. They've tried to make the two synonymous. They've tried to say, you know, if we don't raise the debt ceiling, we're going to have to close down the whole country, you know. But that's not true. It's simply the amount of money that the government is authorized to borrow. And the reason we need to rein it in and not allow it to be raised anymore and actually start drawing it down is because as long as you give politicians money, then they're going to find a way to spend it. It's just like the man said earlier, they're crack addicts, and money is their drug of choice. So if you start to wean them off of that by lowering the debt ceiling, then they're going to have to spend less. The vast majority of what the government spends is A, unconstitutional, and B, stupid. Okay, not necessary. We'll talk about many, many, many things that can be removed from the equation. Okay, the next slide. We'll default on our debt. Have any of these idiots ever read the Constitution? I really wonder, you know. Our president's supposed to be a former constitutional law professor. Of course, that was another lie. He was never a professor. He was a lecturer. And he certainly doesn't understand the Constitution. Anyone who has read the Constitution knows that we're not going to default on our debt. Okay, but you know, I understand people like, you know, your leftist university professors and community organizers getting behind this lie because it's in their interest. But unfortunately, they've convinced a lot of Americans, including some of you, because I'm seeing some comments on here indicating from some people that they believe the lie. But the fact is, the Constitution in the 14th Amendment, Section 4, says this: the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment for pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. So the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned is basically the sentence there. Bottom line is that the government must service the debt with any money that's available. Okay. Now, the fact is that on any given month, it ranges from $180 billion to $200 billion a month. Certain months there's more because businesses and a business cycle and so on. The service on the national debt is $29 billion per month. So there is way more than enough money there, Tom, to pay the interest on the national debt. Way more than enough. Just out of current revenues, we don't have to borrow any more money, increase the debt to pay the debt. We can pay it out of current tax revenues. What will happen is that some other things are not going to get paid, and we'll talk about that. But the bottom line is the 14th Amendment very clearly says that the government has to pay the public debt. Now, the president and Nancy Pelosi have been threatening that the president will use the authority supposedly granted to him in the 14th Amendment to raise the debt ceiling by himself, without authorization from Congress. Again, anybody reading this that has half a brain would not see anything like that in there. They're trying to say that somehow this sentence that you're looking at gives the president authority to raise the debt ceiling. All it says is that the public debt has to be paid. That's debt that has already been incurred. It gives no authority whatsoever to anybody to raise the debt ceiling. Matter of fact, when the Constitution was written, there was no such thing as a debt ceiling. That was a law passed by Congress back in, I believe, the late 60s, early 70s. So the fact that the president and Nancy Pelosi think that they've got some kind of out if Congress doesn't give them what they want and increase the national debt ceiling $2.5 trillion, okay, that somehow he can twist the 14th Amendment, Section 4 here to give him authority to just bypass Congress totally and raise the debt by himself. Total insanity. Okay, the lie that grandma's not going to get her check. And, you know, that like Chuck E. Schumer said, the planes are going to fall out of the sky because we're going to have to lay off the air traffic controllers. The veterans aren't going to get paid. Obama tells us, oh, we're going to have to lay off firefighters and cops and teachers. Excuse the misprint there. All of these are typical Obama scare tactics. They're all lies, okay? Number one, the U.S. government can't lay off the cops and the firefighters and the teachers. They're employed by local government, okay? The veterans won't get paid. Yeah, try that, Obama, and see how quickly you get voted out of office. There's a whole lot more veterans in this country than there are community organizers. None of this is true. As I said earlier, the $180 billion to $200 billion a month, even after you subtract out the money for the national debt, is plenty of money to take care of essential things like the military, like veterans, like air traffic controllers, and certainly Social Security. Total political suicide to anyone who tried not to send a Social Security check, to even send it out 1 or 2 days late to make a point. It would be political suicide. So Obama, it may be a crook, he may be a liar, but he's not stupid. He's actually a pretty smart guy. And there's no way he's going to not pay grandma. He's going to threaten to not pay grandma to try and put pressure on Congress, to try and get you to put pressure on your congressman, but it's a lie. It's a scare tactic. Not going to happen. The lie that it's all the Republicans' fault, okay? Right now the Republicans are not in my good graces, okay, because they have caved into Obama and company. But the fact that he's trying to make it all their fault is just ludicrous. Number one, Obama has run up more debt just in the last 2 years than any president in history has in 8 years of service. But more important, the president was required by law to present a budget to Congress a year ago. He didn't do it. Is the press reporting on that? No. But the fact is the law says that he has to present a budget to Congress every year, and he hasn't done it. If he had done so, there would have been more than enough time to hash all this out, get the budget straightened out, raise the debt ceiling if necessary, and so on. If he had done it when he was supposed to, by law, at that time the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress. He could have passed virtually any budget he wished, but he didn't want to. Now, why didn't he want to? Why didn't he want to get this thing out of the open a year ago? It's because he wanted to wait until 2 weeks before this supposed deadline and force his will on the Congress. He wanted to put pressure to where everybody's running around like chickens with head cut off. He wanted to, thank you, Tom. Tom said this is the first valid point I've made. He doesn't agree with a lot of what I'm saying, which is okay. This could have been taken care of a year ago, but it was deliberately held off until the 11th hour so that there would be no time to go through this thoughtfully, prayerfully, considering all the options. Everyone had to do it in a rush. I saw one senator, it was actually a Democrat senator, complaining on TV today that there's no time. It's just like when they passed Obamacare. They rushed it through Congress. They gave them no time to read it. 2,700 pages. It's the same kind of thing. It's obvious that Obama didn't want a budget he didn't want this particular debate coming up until a time when he could probably force it through. Then I have a real problem with the Republicans basically smokescreen about a balanced budget amendment. This whole thing is a ploy by the Republican leadership to draw attention away from the fact that they caved in on the debt ceiling. Why do I say it's a ploy? Well, because we don't need a balanced budget amendment. It's already in the law. If you look up Public Law number 95-435, Section 7, which was passed in 1978 by a vote in the Senate of 58 to 28, so just about 2 to 1. It says, beginning with fiscal year 1981, the total budget outlays of the federal government shall not exceed its receipts. Now, would it be nice to have a balanced budget amendment to have it in the Constitution? Yeah, I guess it would be. But the Republicans know that's not going to happen with a supermajority in the Senate. And they know that even if the President and the Senate agree today that it would take a minimum of 7 years to get a balanced budget amendment. So why did they throw it in here? Well, it's because they're getting a lot of pressure from the Tea Party. And they basically were being pressured not to allow the debt ceiling to be raised at all, to force spending cuts rather than raising the debt ceiling. Think about yourselves, folks. If you run a business, or just think of your household budget, if you're running out of money, there's two things you can do. You can increase your income or decrease your outgo. Okay? In this case, the leftists, the liberals, don't want to even consider cutting costs. I believe that this whole thing is a smokescreen put up by the Republicans, talking about something that they know most conservatives, including most conservative Democrats, want, a balanced budget amendment, but they know is not a possibility, and they've made that a major part of their talking points to take our attention away from the fact that they just gave in and gave the administration even more than it wanted. The administration wanted $2.4 trillion increase. They gave them 2.5. Now, Tom made the statement that Obama wanted $4 trillion in spending cuts. No, he didn't. He said he did. He made public statements, I'm going to cut $4 trillion from the budget, but he never had any intention of doing that, and he never presented a bill. He never presented a budget. The Republicans have complained about that for the last 2 weeks. Okay, you don't like what we come up with? Then give us something. And they never did until just a few days ago with this Mickey Mouse Reed thing that even his own supermajority won't vote for. He wouldn't bring it up for a vote. He kept delaying it because he knew that he didn't have the votes to pass it. So the Democrats and the president haven't come up with anything except platitudes. There were generalities. We're going to cut these. We're going to cut spending. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, but no specifics. Okay. So we've got a law. What we need to do is enforce it. Now, I want you to listen to what Obama said in 2006. Remember, this was when he was a senator running for the White House. Okay. That's basically all he did during his time in the Senate was run around the country campaigning for the presidency. But he did stick around every once in a while and actually vote on a few things. And he's a real good chameleon, just like this thing is saying he wants to cut $4 trillion. Back then, he voted against raising the debt limit. And everything he says is right. He just picked it up like a chameleon does from the conservative people. But this is an exact quote from the